Hello, everyone, and welcome to our show, MSL Insights. Today, we're going to be discussing the importance of emotional intelligence for effective MSL KOL engagements during the COVID-19 pandemic. My name is Samuel Dyer, and I'm the chairman of the board for the Medical Science Liaison Society. And for those on the line that don't know, the MSL Society is a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and in fact, the only organization dedicated to advancing the global MSL profession by helping MSLs and managers become more effective in their careers. And certainly this show is a part of that. So we accomplish this by offering numerous unique resources, including the first and only board certification for MSLs and MSL leaders. In simple terms, like any other certification, it allows experienced MSLs and managers to validate their skills and knowledge of the MSL profession based on criteria determined by a large number of independent MSL and medical affairs leaders from some of the top pharmaceutical companies. If you're interested in learning more about the MSL certification, you can see the URL there on the screen, and we'll send some information after the show as well. As a reminder, nominations for the 2020 MSL of the Year Awards are still open as well. This year, there are 8 categories, including MSL Rookie of the Year, MSL of the Year, and MSL Manager Rookie of the Year, and MSL Manager of the Year, with each having U.S. and outside U.S. awards. So this year, we will have 12 highly experienced MSL leaders that will be judging submissions. The awards are completely free to enter and to win, and you do not need to be a member of the MSL Society to participate or to win an award. We'll send you a link to everyone after the show as well. But again, there's the URL on the show or on the link there on the page. So I just wanted to take a moment to remind everyone about that. So before we get started, just want to go over a few quick technical details. As participants, you can hear us, but we cannot hear you. However, in your control panel, you'll notice you have a question panel. We encourage you to type your comments or questions into the question panel, and throughout the discussion, we'll try to address as many relevant questions as possible. Throughout the show, I will try to answer as many questions as I can. And what I'll do is I will mention and read the question verbatim and your first name only, so everybody knows that their question is being asked. We have been asked also if we're recording this by several people. Yes, we are recording it. The show will be available on the MSL Society website for everyone very soon. We just need a few days to put it together and get it up on the website. I also wanted to thank H1 for sponsoring and partnering with us for today's show. And so there is their URL there. They do some great stuff. I encourage you to go check out H1. So that brings us to today's show. Today, we're going to discuss, of course, the importance of emotional intelligence. And for today's show, we've had well over 500 MSLs, managers, directors, and VPs from 49 countries register. Emotional intelligence is this very big, broad topic. And although we're not going to be able to cover all the aspects of emotional intelligence today during the show, we are going to discuss some important aspects of it and how emotional intelligence can have an impact on the success of MSLs. So joining me today to discuss this important topic is Dr. Doug Yao, who is the National Director of Oncology Field Medical Affairs at Sanofi Genzyme, and Rob Consalvo, who is the Director of Strategic Commercial Engagement at H1. So Doug, Rob, thank you very much for being with me here today.
Sir, pleasure to be on the show.
So I want to start our show today with sharing the results of one of the questions from a recent survey that we're running right now, the MSL Society. We asked 321 MSLs and managers, having a high level of emotional intelligence is crucial to the success of an MSL, true or false? Interestingly, 99% of MSLs and managers marked true. Doug, I'm going to start with you. Maybe you can give us a quick reaction. I'm going to have both of you give us a quick reaction to these survey results? Are you surprised? And when you hear that, what's your reaction?
I'm definitely not surprised, Samuel. I think that for most of us who have worked as MSLs before, high EQ is necessary in order to have a long-lasting relationship with not only your KOLs but also your internal team. I would be interested in hearing what the definition is, perhaps, or where we can give one as to the people who said no, and perhaps it's just a matter of the definition of how EQ is thought of by them.
Yep, excellent. Yep, Rob, any reaction to that survey result?
Yeah, similar to Doug, I'm not really surprised. I think that most of the people that are in the role uh, probably do pride themselves on those relationships, and given that that is one of the core tenets of emotional intelligence, I'm not terribly surprised either.
Yeah, I'm not either, and actually I'm encouraged. And in fact, the interesting thing, Doug, going back to your question, who was the 1% that said no, it's not important? Interestingly, the 1% were actually newer MSLs, and so maybe it's just something that they'll learn later on as their career progresses. Um, as we get started, I thought it'd be important to do kind of a level set. As I kind of started and alluded to, and as I stated earlier, emotional intelligence is this very broad topic. Doug, I'm going to start with you. You've got a great background in emotional intelligence. I know you're certified in this topic. I know this is a particular passion for you. Can you, and I'm going to have both of you comment on this, but can you provide us how you define emotional intelligence and maybe the context of which you're going to be discussing it today? Maybe just a quick level set for all of us.
Sure, Samuel. And for me, I come from the academic side of things, so I'm going to go a little nerdy here, right? I go by probably Daniel Goleman's and Bradbury's definitions. So you're looking at 5 basic categories of EQ skills, from self-awareness and self-management to social awareness and relationship management, and this 5th one called motivation. But on top of this, I think that in defining EQ and how it relates to us and to level sets, for me, EQ is more of the empathy, the social skills, how to be more stress tolerant, or working in teams and having good communication with your peers. And finally, accountability. So those will be some of the topics that I'll be commenting on throughout the rest of the show.
Excellent. Rob, any comments, or can you share kind of what how you define it and in the context you're going to take it today?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, Doug, you hit the nail on the head, right? Goldman's definition of it, as he wrote the book, right, is perfect. I typically also like to include one additional element that has some overlap to everything you just described, and that's a sense of global awareness, right? So self-awareness and social awareness, but then taking it one step beyond that to understand the impact of the decisions that you're making, be they ethical or just in general on the folks around the world. I think that it's an important component to just include as a level of emotional intelligence.
Excellent. Yeah, this is great context for us to start. And let me get into our first sort of discussion point today. This whole idea of emotional intelligence, I think, and we saw this from the survey result. 99% said, "Yep, it's crucial to the success of an MSL," and it's been well established as being important to the success of an MSL long before this show and that survey question. But my question is for Doug and Rob, and Doug, I'm going to start with you on this. Has anything changed as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic?
Yes, and I'll give 2 examples of how observations I've seen that changed in our MSL world since the pandemic. So number 1, there has been a severe change in our daily routine. If you think about it, prior to the pandemic, MSLs, as you know, were road warriors, right? We traveled by plane, got to our destination city, checked into a hotel, drove to a few hospitals, met our KOLs, and flew back home. And you can also add in, a couple conference calls and a couple of flight delays. And this is a very common MSL work week. But now, if you look at how things have changed, MSLs now are working from home. We may be juggling kids, schoolwork, taking care of elderly family members, and also worrying about our own health and safety every time we go out. So as this happened, it can be very exhausting. And so people have to first be self-aware of these feelings that they're having, and also be self-motivated and be able to self-manage themselves to continue to work in this new normal. Now, the second one I'm just going to mention is going to be based on I would say conference calls and being at home. I think that as a MSL, we're accustomed to seeing people face to face and picking up on social cues, picking up on tone of voice, and this may or may not happen in this new environment. But if you think about it, we are very good at adaptations. So we've adapted to use GoToMeeting, Zoom, Skype, all your video conferencing technology to try to simulate the engagement as we may have it live. But now we're realizing that we also are getting Zoom fatigue, as they call it, right? And so it is exhausting being on for 7-8 hours a day talking to people. And so again, as managers and as MSLs, we have to be self-aware about our limitations, our stress level, and be able to change up the technology as so needed, just so that we can be the best we can with every KO engagement that we have online.
Yeah, this is excellent, and I think that I mean more than any time, it may be even more important now. You know, that component of emotional intelligence, of self-awareness, and as you said, because you know the resulting is certainly Zoom fatigue and some other confounding factors. Rob, any thoughts on this? What has either from your observation working with other companies,
Mhm.
what's changed as a result of COVID-19?
Yeah, I think Doug, both you and Samuel said it very well. I think across the board, what I'm seeing is one, there's definitely an increased need for adaptability, which I think is one of those core soft skills, I guess you could call them, for the concept of self-regulation. But then even more so is the ability to not just, and Doug, you alluded to this, ability to not just look externally, right? A lot of the role of an MSL is in sort of reading the situation and being present in that moment and engaging with another individual. But I think what we're seeing across the board is there's also a really strong need to take that lens and turn it inward, right? And get that feel for how you yourself are also approaching the situation. Zoom fatigue is a really good example, right? Being mindful of those limitations of your day, of yourself, and being okay with that, right? And then at the same time, right, from a global awareness perspective, understanding that different people, if you're working with folks around the world, different countries, different people are going to have different reactions to the situation. And just again, maintaining that adaptability has been fairly critical, at least from the groups that I've interacted with.
Yeah, this is excellent. Excellent. And just a comment from the audience, and no real question here, but Richard has said, I'm surprised with the 1% who thinks it's not important, emotional intelligence. So Richard, I think we all agree. Um, Rob, I think this is excellent. I mean, and I think both of you brought up some great points. And I think it's a really good transition into our next sort of topic, which is all around how this fits into building relationships. So maybe Rob, I'll start with you on this one. Where do you think emotional intelligence fits into building relationships with KOLs and now this new norm of this virtual environment?
It's a great question, Samuel. So I think in terms of building relationships in this world that we're in right now, EI really comes into play when you want to approach new ways of actually building those relationships. So one of the things that I've seen working really well and that I personally recommend is to open those lines of communication internally within the organization, right? And something that cross-functional capacities have been talked about endlessly over the past few years, but now more than ever, I think it's particularly relevant. But taking that one step further and building your EQ skills, right? Look across the aisle, so to speak, on not just their ability, but on the person that is on that other side as well. Try and build those collaborations and building those relationships, having the social awareness to know what challenges someone else might be facing in building that and collaborating together to solve unique problems.
Yep. Doug, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I have two, and I'll piggyback off of Rob's comments. I think that when you look internally first at how you can bring value, I think also you focus on teamwork. This is one aspect of working virtually now is I have the luxury of calling my teammates, which are more specialists than I am, to support me in these KOL engagements to bring extra value to my KOL, whether it's a medical director, whether it's R&D team. Because we are using virtual technology, we can get together any time of day without having the concern of having to get on a flight. So that's one thing where I think there's extra teamwork now more than ever. The second thing is something that you've probably spoken a lot about, Samuel, is about value to the KOL. Irregardless of whether or not we're in this pandemic, value is the same, right? What is it that you're bringing to this KOL that they're going to dedicate 5 to 10 or half an hour of their time to talk to you on a phone call or on a Zoom call? It's not just enough nowadays to just say, well, we're going to have an ad board or we're having some discussions about insight questions now, right? That is not going to be an easy sell to them. However, if you're coming from their perspective, so thinking about what is it in their shoes that they're valuing most of the time is patience, then from that lens, we can adapt how we communicate with them and present items in which there may be of more value for them to have this scientific engagement with you so that you can have these insights, understand data gaps, or kind of move forward some of the clinical studies that we have already ongoing with them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a great point. I mean, you think about nothing has changed. I mean, the last several weeks of these shows, there has been this theme that nothing has changed in the fact that, again, the success of an MSL will be dependent on their ability to add value. And it just means that today, the channels of that communication and how we add value may have changed, but if you're not adding value, well, the result of that is going to be less access and all these other things. And certainly emotional intelligence fits into one's ability to do that. Just a comment from the audience. Sasan has said, great discussion. Kudos to all organizers. So thanks to the panel. Here's a question from Sylvia has said, rather than COVID, I'd love to hear of EQ and current activity. Okay, so I'd love to hear about current discussion activities to improve information and care access to minorities that have historically had low access and health disparities. Is there anything different with this, Doug or Rob, as it relates to this?
Rob, would you like to go first?
Yeah, sure thing. So, Sylvia, first off, fantastic question. Thank you for calling that to light. I think that broadly, EQ is something that affects all interactions, right? When you take the global lens on this, right, that global awareness lens, it also includes understanding that the interactions that people have based on their current circumstances are going to be different. In a previous life, I had done a lot of work with low socioeconomic school districts. And oftentimes what we found is that if you just look at sort of like almost like a Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right, when there are different elements that are not being met based on a person's socioeconomic status or their place within the larger hierarchy there, they're not able to think of some of those more high-minded ideas and concepts around like adaptability, and adaptability means a whole different thing. So I think being cognizant of that, right, as someone who is in the position of having the authority, right, being aware of that and being able to communicate things effectively and consider that as you're approaching the situation is valuable. There are ways to do that, and we can spend a whole lot of time talking about it. But I think getting to the core of that is asking the question of why something is important to that person and how you can relate it to them. That's the piece of advice that I can at least offer, the why.
Excellent.
Very
Doug, any thoughts on the race issue and current race discussions and activities?
Yes, I think that's for one thing, I know that a lot of companies are increasing our diversity and inclusion training. So that's one part to increase our EQ on that topic and our skill level there. Second thing is understanding with advances in technology now, we are engaging actually a broader range of KOLs. Traditionally, we're limited based on travel time and travel distance, but now I know that MSLs can induce or can discuss with various KOLs from even small institutions, more rural institutions, or underrepresented areas. And it comes from empathy for the physician as well as for the patients, understanding their needs and trying to incorporate what they have in terms of data gaps or treatment gaps with what we can offer from a company or MSL standpoint in terms of diversifying our patient population or diversifying our researchers. So it's not just all the premier centers, but also some of the up and coming or developing KOLs or developing centers to help them get to that higher level. So it's been a very, I would say, increasing awareness about that, and for us trying to make it better for all of us.
Doug, I
Yeah, I
love
think
that. Oh, sorry.
go ahead, Rob, please
I
jump
was
in.
just going to say, I really love what you just said there, Doug. I think that one of the key things is that awareness building, right? I think if you even just look at a lot of the way that people talk about EQ in general, a lot of it is just having an awareness of those things that do exist. And I think that's the first hurdle, right? I think that's one of the biggest things. So I really appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah, and I guess these are great comments, and I think about because I think the really underlying question around Sylvia's point is around current race discussions, activities, and less access. And when I think about, look, I think everybody's struggling and sick to death of this whole COVID situation. We're all trying to get back to some level of new normal. But I think the one thing that you could say about this, and Doug, I'd love your comments on this from management perspective, is the one thing about being virtual is that there's the potential for us to have a broader reach and access to KOLs, less travel, less time per KOL. Would you agree with that? And that might fit into this, and that might give us a greater opportunity for this.
I completely agree. And from what we've seen also is that based on our reach right now, a lot of the more, I would say, smaller centers, which we may or may not have engaged with in the past, have been quite open for us to communicate with and for us to start forging that new relationship. So yes, I completely agree that we've been talking to more people. We've been talking to a more diverse group of physicians as well as supportive staff. And it's going to continue on whether we return back to a new normal or not. This virtual realm would continue to provide us with greater reach.
Yep, excellent. So we got a lot of questions coming in. Keep them coming. Thank you very much. So here's the next comment and question from Wasim. Wasim says, and by the way, I do apologize ahead of time if I have mispronounced anybody's first name. I apologize, and certainly feel free to correct me on chat here. Wasim has said, thank you, MSL Society, for an excellent topic. You're welcome. Based on a survey, it shows that EQ is crucial for MSL success. So how can we improve EQ during current pandemic on daily basis and reflected in scientific engagement with KOLs? Doug, I'm going to let you start with that one.
That's a good question. I think that you're already one step farther than a lot of other folks because now you're self-aware that you want to improve, right? And having the motivation to improve is one step in the right direction to gaining higher EQ. What I could say is that there is a wealth of resources available online already, from recorded webinars to exercises posted by a lot of our leading thought leaders on EQ itself, and some examples of how you can conduct various training elements to improve yourself. I think also having an EQ coach or having a mentor that you could talk to about specific skill sets you feel as a deficit can help you improve those, and especially those in terms of social awareness and relationship building, because these are the two that are external facing skills in which an MSL needs to, I would say, accelerate their skill level for in order to be successful. So I would say count on your senior MSLs, your executive MSLs, your managers and mentors to coach you there, and be open to them for giving you advice as to how to practice in order to get those skill sets at that high level.
Excellent. Excellent. Rob, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely, Doug. I think you nailed it. I think that the mentorship component is critical, right? There are a lot of things that require the self-reflection. And to the person who posed the question, one, again, commend you for for thinking about it from that perspective, Doug's right. You already have a leg up if you're thinking about it from the perspective of how can I continue to improve my skills in these areas. The best ways that I've seen, one, talking to mentors and peers, being candid in those conversations, because that's the only way to really sort of grow in those areas. And if you are looking for different resources or tools or books, there are definitely tools online that exist. I can make some book recommendations as well. And maybe if we want to share after the fact, Samuel, that's fine as well. But there's a bunch of blogs by Daniel Goleman that are great. Adam Grant is another really good thought leader in this space, as well as Angela Duckworth, Katie Milkman, a whole host of folks, Carol Dweck around mindset. And then I think all of those folks can give you some really good books to read or blogs to follow, podcasts to listen to.
Excellent. Excellent. Another point that has been brought up a lot during the whole COVID situation, obviously hiring, interviewing has changed. Everything going virtual, and you can imagine a brand new, especially for brand new MSLs or for MSLs that are out there and trying to build new relationships with KOL. So I'm a new MSL and I don't get the opportunity to go in person and build that initial relationship, or I'm building new relationships with KOLs and experienced MSL. So that's where I'm going with this. Doug, I'm going to start with you. Using emotional intelligence, can you talk about using emotional intelligence to build effective new KOL relationships?
Yes. So depending on whether or not you use telephone versus video, that's going to limit or increase the amount of perceptual cues you will get from the KOL. But with either one, I think that you still have to go through the same pre-call exercises, right? You are going to research them, you're going to talk to your internal teammates, and you're going to prepare just like you would live on what would make this KOL be interested in spending 30 minutes or an hour of their time to talk to you. What's of value to them? Second is going to be as instantly when you converse with them. This is the art of the MSL talking now. This is your small talk, your empathy towards what's happening in real life, right? Because the KOL cannot properly have a dialogue with you about some recent guideline changes or changes in the treatment landscape if they have the patient at their top of mind, if they're trying to rush to the next surgery. And so you have to be able to account for that, acknowledge it as an issue, and have a frank discussion with them first before you get into your own business. And if you're able to do that, then the KOL could tell that you're caring about them as a person, and also their patients, and then they would be able to dedicate time to listen to you without that extra, I would say, emotional hurdle. and be able to converse with you as you would pre-COVID timeframe. And so that's the beginning of them building trust with you. And then finally, with you delivering on that accountability piece of that homework that you get after you meet with a KOL, in which you have to report back on whatever they ask for. And if you're able to do that, then that trust continues to build, and you may have yourself a long-term KOL advocate and relationship.
Excellent. Yep, I think some great points. Rob, any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I love the way you put that, Doug. I think trust is core and key to building these relationships effectively. And I think we're presented with a unique opportunity in this time, right, to really demonstrate that level of empathy that we all strive for, right? I think that empathy is really how you can use the concepts of EI to build those new relationships, apart from working with cross-functional colleagues and being comfortable with changing your approach to how you're actually engaging folks, to both of your other points as well, Doug. But I think that empathy is really going to be what drives a lot of those relationships further faster, because it does build that trust. It builds the compassion, right, between the two parties. So I think you're spot on.
Yeah, I agree with both of you as well. And certainly, having a plan, executing on that plan, trying to find whatever that value proposition is, and being self-aware. I mean, I think you guys raised a lot of really good points to be thinking about as you're reaching out to new KOLs. There has to have some clear objectives, but it's got to be based on obviously the KOL needs. And part of the art of being an MSL is uncovering them and then executing on them. Here's another comment, and I think the empathy thing is really important. We're going to come back to that. Here's another comment from Tim. Tim says, some KOLs like virtual engagements and would prefer to continue with even after the COVID restrictions have been lifted. We know that from the survey we conducted with 475 KOLs with H1, actually. How do we adapt our EQ skills from in-person meetings to virtual meetings if this becomes the new norm? Rob, I'll start with you.
I love this question. So there's a ton of ways that you can do this, actually. It helps to reframe your mindset around virtual engagement. So this could be done via video, phone call, or text. And I'd like to think about text for a second, because it's important to look at the actual way that people are communicating and the words that they're using and what that might convey. So really, when you think about how you can change your approach in the digital space by leveraging EQ, it's going to mimic a lot of the same concepts that you would in your interpersonal interactions regularly, right? Look for those cues within the text of someone's messages. Look for someone shifting or the messiness of their space if you do have a video call or something like that, to pick up on what stresses they may be feeling, right? Extend yourself in that way and try and grow, again, just into that sort of adaptable mindset. Grow towards that. And I think you'll be in really good shape for getting a better feel for that.
Excellent. Doug, any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think also it's you have to work on small talk, because really it's the beginning of how a relationship is just that casualness that you may bring to the table, and uncovering what's the leading concern or drivers for that KOL as you begin that conversation. If you're able to do that and kind of lower their defenses, then they'll be more comfortable speaking with you on the things that matter to you, which are most likely in either clinically related or understanding how their perception of certain data is impacting the landscape. So if you're able to engage with them in a deeper level, and as Rob put it, picking up on those cues, then I don't see why you should not continue with this new normal, right? I think that companies are adapting to virtual as a method of communication, And that just means one less flight for you. And maybe you could have a subset of KOLs which prefer this method, which means that you have more flexibility in your day for not having to travel during those hours because now you're just on the computer, and you may be more productive because of this new technology now.
Yep. Yeah, these are excellent points. And I think that, when I think about this, and just to summarize some of the things you guys said, when I first think about this, first of all, don't be weird. Be normal, be able to carry on a conversation. But there's of course, a famous book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. Certainly, being able to make a connection with people, and as relates to this new norm, it's clear it's here to stay. And so we as a profession need to adapt and adjust to that. And we need to go where the KOLs are and where they want to be. And it's clear from survey work that this is where KOLs want to be. So I think it's important. Doug, Rob, you both had mentioned this whole idea of empathy. We brought it up a few times. Doug, I'm going to start with you on this. Can you talk about and address the idea and the importance of leading with empathy and uncovering KOLs' needs or concerns, especially related to, their patients, their practice? I mean, we kind of alluded to some of this, but can you specifically talk about that, the importance of leading with empathy?
Yes, and I actually from field rides of MSLs, we've seen this firsthand. I'm sure many managers and MSLs have done the same as to what's the leading concerns that KOLs have, even before we start on our discussions, right? So you mentioned quite a few number of things. One thing is patient and patient safety, right? If you work in a therapeutic area where patients need treatment, but then there's a concern about COVID and their safety in getting that treatment while in the inpatient setting, that's a concern. If they have budget cuts and their staff is being laid off, or providers are getting, their salary cut in half, that's a big concern that you have to address before you can even get to business. And then finally, their own safety. These physicians, some of them have been out of work and been at home for a while because they were more on elective surgery side, or they may be going to work and putting themselves at risk by working on the oncology units, the surgical units, where they're being presented with patients that may have COVID. So really, you have to imagine what it is like in their shoes and communicate that first, acknowledge it before you can go further on. And I would say how you present yourself today may impact how the KOLs may welcome you back in the future. Hopefully, this empathy that you develop through your EQ coaching or training can lead to a stronger relationship down the road where the normal becomes more steady.
Excellent. Rob, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, again, Doug, I think you nailed it. The what you described is a lot of the external practices from a leading with empathy perspective, right? Maintaining that the interactions that folks are having in the field do need to be coming from a place of empathy, and managers should be supporting that. I think there's also the internal aspect too to leading with empathy. I think Adam Grant has a great podcast about this. So if anyone would like to check it out, go ahead. But basically making sure that you're aware of those elements that are taking place, not just within the lives of the people that you're trying to relate with externally, but also internally, right? People are going to have a lot of different limitations that are going to be put on them. Partners and spouses might be out of work. They might be sick. Family members might be experiencing those things. And just keeping that in mind as we continue to charge forward in the actual mission and goals of our different organizations, keeping that in mind from the perspective of the individual actually trying to accomplish those goals.
Excellent. Yeah, I think these are some great points. And if we could just quickly touch on another aspect of this, and Rob, you already kind of talked about this, you alluded to this, but Patrick has asked, can you please comment on the role and importance of empathy for MSLs to both connect with internal and external stakeholders? How do you operationalize that? So I think we've already talked about the the external, and you started to allude to the internal. So maybe you guys could just quickly talk about the internal and how do we operationalize that? Any quick comments on that, Rob?
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of different ways that you can do that. One of the fastest ways that I think can be implemented immediately is developing a structure for one-on-one meetings. If you're trying to prioritize empathy as an organization, the most important thing is just to develop those channels for communication. And the easiest way to do that is just to set half an hour a week with people that either you interact with very frequently, just for a personal connection, or those folks that you might not interact with as frequently, maybe auxiliary people within the organization or what have you, just to develop those types of connections and collaborations and open lines of communication.
Excellent. Doug, any thoughts on that internal collaboration, leading with empathy and operationalizing that?
Absolutely. As an MSL manager, I feel that we have to lead with empathy, right? We have to be able to accommodate as much as we can to the lives of our MSLs. Think about it. When I hire somebody, we're hiring them and their family, right? That's my perspective. And so when we treat them as family, we look at how can we help them succeed, remove barriers, understand, empathize about their situation at home and what they're dealing with. And as much as we can, make our deliverables flexible enough so that they can get the work done in the expected timelines, but be variable into how each person can accomplish that. One-on-one meetings, as Rob said, is perfect in getting to know your team members, especially those new ones that we haven't been able to build that trust yet deeply. And that's how they get to know you as a manager as well as your teammates. And then also, I think some virtual team building has been seen across the board, right? From some virtual happy hours or coffee hours to just time in which the team gets to chat about anything but work, right? You're sharing stories about family, your trips or lack of trips, and weird things that your family has done during times of COVID. That's the bonding that you start to form within your team that when we come out of this will make your team stronger.
Yeah, these are excellent. And in fact, Nancy just typed in, and Nancy, I hope we just addressed that. If not, tell me again. But she says, I'm thinking of our new MSLs who may be on the call. Examples are very helpful to them instead of just talking about concepts. And I think you just did. You just listed a bunch of them that I think would be really helpful. So Nancy, if that wasn't it, let us know. Here's another comment and question from the audience. Gail says, excellent points. How about the complaint by KOLs that they are getting inundated with emails and requests from virtual meetings from pharma on both the commercial and medical affairs side? Doug, how are you guys addressing that, or is it a concern? Are you guys dealing with that, and if so, how?
It is a very big concern because what you don't want to do is inundate them and then burn them out, and then you would never be invited back to a meeting ever again. So what we have seen is that some MSLs have been very cognizant about who they're reaching out to now. Is it an urgent matter that we need to speak to the KOL now in terms of crisis? Or is this somebody that we can meet with in a month from now or 2 months from now, right? What is this information we're getting from them? Can we get it through alternative means, right? Maybe instead of having a phone call or conversation, we could do something by email and they could do it at a later time. So being aware of how much of a burden or time sap that we would have with them and the importance of that meeting has to be weighed in together in order to make sure that we still retain them as champions for us and not as people that would put us into spam mail in the future.
Excellent. Rob, any thoughts?
Yeah, no, I think Doug, you nailed it. As you have the the rest of this conversation, I think that it's important to be respectful of the time of the individuals with whom you're looking to engage, and get a little creative too if you have the capacity to do so. Look into asynchronous communication methods. Doug, you mentioned email, but if you do prefer like that face-to-face, so to speak, there are asynchronous video options, right? You can open up that type of a communication channel and hopefully someone would be interested in that versus just an email. If it's, it also is a unique way of approaching the engagement. So it could be a novel way for the person to also look to engage.
Excellent. We got another question here from Nancy. Maybe you guys could quickly address this. We're getting a lot of questions, and we're trying to get through as many as possible, everybody in the audience. Nancy asked, how did the MSL lead with empathy? What was said and maybe how it was received? So I guess they're looking for maybe a couple of specific examples. Any quick thoughts on that?
Rob, I'll have you go first, because then I could follow with some comments.
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of leading with empathy from an outreach perspective and interaction perspective, one, the most important thing, and we've talked about this a lot, I know Samuel always talks about it, but it's doing that homework and understanding the person, right? It's more easy to be empathetic when you are able to actually understand the full scope of that individual. So from a leading with empathy perspective, you have to really get a feel for who that person is as much as you possibly can. The second is really just like the golden rule, treat others how you would want to be treated. Just take it from that perspective as well, right? If you are an MSL reaching out to a KOL, if the roles were reversed, how would you prefer to be engaged, right? Thinking about it from both of those perspectives, knowing the person, so this way you can get a feel for what would be important to them, and then two, thinking about how you can tie that into how you would like to be engaged. It just helps to build a strong process for you to then follow when you're trying to reach out to someone new.
Excellent. Doug, any thoughts?
Yeah, great points. It's a follow up. I think that also when you talk to the KOL, you also want to set up a quick agenda as to what your purpose is, because the hardest thing is that KOLs don't want to accept a meeting if the agenda is ambiguous, and they want to see something of value, and we want to be able to be clear about why we're reaching out to them for 10-15 minutes. Second thing is you can always ask them, right? This is part of the communication part of EQ is if you don't know, ask. You say, when is the best time frame for me to meet? I know you're really busy. I want to acknowledge it. Is this a good time, or should we meet in 2 or 3 weeks? And they'll just tell you. They say, we appreciate you reaching out to me. I appreciate your concern, but let's meet in September when things calm down. Or you give them options. You could say, well, can I talk, if I can't talk to you, can you delegate to somebody else I could talk to? Maybe it's a research fellow, maybe it's a postdoc or a nurse that I could talk to, and you could get similar information that may be representative of either the KOL or the KOL lab about any of the topics you want to talk about. So be creative, use their network, and be very clear as to what your purpose is, because you're very mindful of their time.
Yeah, these are excellent points. Be clear, be aware, right? I mean, I think this is really good. Ramon actually made a comment, a great comment. It says, agree the need to access one's EQ for internal interactions seems to be heightened as of late. Just a comment. We're running out of time here, unfortunately. Maybe we could do one more question here, Lil has shared a comment, and maybe you guys could just quickly comment about this. Lil has said, I participated in a virtual roundtable last night, and I acknowledged the anxiety of HCPs adjusting to a new way to conduct health assessments and visits. They really like that. The young HCPs adapt quickly and like telemedicine, but the seasoned HCPs are struggling with the new ways. Any quick comments on either one of those, Doug?
Yes, for the seasoned HCPs who are not as familiar with technology, I think that you need to look at two perspectives. Is this a unwillingness to change? So that's a motivation perspective, or is it a lack of understanding or education, which is a training need? So once you understand that, our job as MSLs, or our job as a part of the healthcare team, whether it's internal or external, is going to be, can we remove those boundaries for you, right? This is the empathy about, can I help you? The teamwork, removing stress for them. And if we're able to do either one of them, then you would be able to see that they would be able to adapt to this new technology, because they know that it's not going to go away. They have to change with the times, and here we are as their advocates to help them along.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. Rob, any thoughts?
Yeah, Doug, I love the concept of the motivation, right, and distilling that out for the people. And I think you're spot on, right? I think from a technology perspective, that's the easier lift, right, in terms of just helping someone become more acclimated with technology. It might not always seem that way, but it is not. You're not battling as much conceptually as you do when you're approaching someone who's resistant to change. And it's perfectly reasonable to be resistant to change, and just acknowledging that as the MSL or whoever would be involved in the healthcare ecosystem, right, to help elicit that change. But I think just if you are able to tap into that why again, like what is it that's motivating that reticence to actually make the change that would improve patient outcomes or what have you, right? If you can tap into that and then show some of those things that have been positive results of making that switch or that change, or even eliciting some of their peers, their younger peers or peers who have adopted this change to evangelize it for them, right? I think those are some ways that you can also help to sort of get around that last one, that pain of change.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely, and helping them adapt and being aware of that. I mean, I think that's you guys really some great points here. We're running out of time, unfortunately. But what I wanted to end it with here, from the two of you, and Rob, I'm going to start with you on this. What is one practical piece of advice or tip you could recommend to our listeners on how to improve their emotional intelligence, or some of the other topics that we discussed here today?
Absolutely. Practical piece of advice that I can give is to continue the curiosity that brought you to this presentation today, right? If you're on this session, it's because you have a curiosity or you believe that this could be something that would be of value. Continue to explore that. If you are looking for some additional resources, please go continue to explore those. If my recommendation as a foundational piece is the book called Mindset. I think it is one of those pieces that'll help to just expand your resource toolkit, so to speak. And I'll leave it at that and turn it over to Doug.
For me, I agree with Rob. You need to have that growth mindset. Be open to change. This is the first step in improving yourself, because if you already feel that you have a strong EQ, well, validate it, right? Do all your peers feel that way? Do your managers feel that way? And you can also always grow. If you are one that you see that you have a lack of EQ, then be aware of there are resources available to help you with that. There's exercises to do and get mentorship and coaching. And if you are high EQ, then teach. This is your way of helping the next group of MSLs and your team to succeed in the field and become future leaders. And so on either side of the EQ spectrum, you can do a lot of good to your company and your team.
Excellent. Unfortunately, we're running out of time here, but I think this was a great discussion today, and we got a lot more questions than unfortunately than we had time for. So I really apologize that we were not able to get through everything. Rob and Doug, thank you very much for being here. I want to certainly once again thank H1 for sponsoring the event and partnering with us on this. This is a really important topic. We got a lot of questions in the chat box about a list of resources. So we were not planning on this, but I will work with Rob and Doug to create a list, and we will send it out to everyone who registered for the webinar today. So I'll make sure that you guys get that. Just as a reminder, our next show, MSL Insights, taking place next Friday, August 21st. Once again, 1 to 2 p.m. Eastern Standard. We're going to talk about the importance of an integrated KOL engagement strategy Registration for that will actually come out via email to everyone soon. And so with that, I want to wrap up today's show. I want to thank all of you being active participants and all of the great questions. We really do appreciate that. Hopefully you found this very valuable. As I mentioned, MSL Insights will be ongoing. We have a brief survey we'd like for everyone to participate in at the end of the webinar, just to help us really form and guide our upcoming show. So with that, Rob, Doug, thank you very much for joining me, and thanks everyone for tuning in.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Samuel. Thank you, everyone.